Welcome back to the Noble Pursuit podcast. I'm your host, Landry Coleman. Today, I'm joined by Congressman John McGuire, who represents Virginia's 5th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. In this conversation, we talk about how he went from being in foster care to being a U.S. Navy SEAL. We also discuss fatherhood, leadership, and what made him decide to run for Congress. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Congressman John McGuire. All right. Thank you so much, Congressman McGuire, for joining me on the Noble Pursuit podcast today. If you could give our listeners just a brief introduction about who you are and, kind of the things that you care about.
Sure. I'm Congressman John McGuire. I'm a father of 5. My wife is my best friend, and I'm a Christian conservative and a Navy SEAL veteran. And just feel like life is a miracle and must be protected. And I've had an interesting, rocky road in the beginning, but God has a plan for us. What I tell people is those that think they have a tough life, just remember that God gives us adversity to chisel us into the men and women we're supposed to be. But I think God has a purpose for all of us, and no matter how bad you think you might have it, it could always be worse.
So I was reading your bio online, and it talked a little bit about the time that you spent in foster care while you were a child. Can you share about that experience and how it shaped you as a man?
Sure. So I'm 57 years old. I've never tasted alcohol, never tried drugs or cigarettes. Always joke that I got plenty of other issues. But the reason is my parents had substance abuse issues, and my sister and I were abandoned. The police found me and my sister and put us in a foster home. We were together in the first foster home, and then we got separated. I ended up attending 9 different elementary schools. Some of these foster homes had religion, some didn't. But I definitely know firsthand that the importance of educating your children in a church, because those Sunday school lessons carried me my entire life. In fact, I remember one foster home didn't have religion at all, but I still prayed by my bed at night for what I learned from Sunday school. And so then my grandfather, he fought in World War II, toughest man I ever met. Him and my grandmother had already raised their kids, but they rescued me and my sister, and they raised us until my dad got sober.
What did your dad's experience and struggle with addiction? And I read in your bio about how proud you were of him, like just getting sober. What did that experience teach you about grace and forgiveness and perseverance as well?
That's a good message, actually. I always tell people that if God can show us grace, then maybe we need to show others grace. I was angry with my mom for years for abandoning me, but now that I'm 57 years old and I look back, maybe she did the best she could, and maybe I would not have been as successful. But my relationship with my father is great. He's 84 years old, and I don't know if you know, but on November 5th, 2024, through the grace of God, I call it a week of redemption, because in that week, President Trump got reelected for a second term. My dad celebrated 41 years sobriety. My younger brother got promoted to brigadier general in the Army, and I got elected to Congress all in the same week. And we went to my dad and we said, if you hadn't fought so hard to be sober, he wouldn't be brigadier general and I wouldn't be a member of Congress. But I got to tell you, my dad has had some troubles. We all do. But he's got the biggest heart. He will give you the shirt off his back. When I first got out of the Navy, I was driving an F-150 pickup truck, 1986, $1,500 cheap pickup truck down Broad Street. And all of a sudden, my tire blew out. It destroyed the tire and the wheel. So I limped over to a tire repair place, and I sat in the waiting area while they replaced the wheel and the tire. When I went to pay for it, the owner said, your money's no good here. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, are you John McGuire's boy? And I go, yes, sir. He goes, he's helped me out of more jams than anybody I remember, and the least I can do is give you a new wheel and a tire. But I never told the guy who I was. So I said, how do you know I'm John McGuire's boy? He said, you look just like him. But the point is, my dad would take care of everybody else but himself. He has a big heart. And I'm so glad that he got sober for 41 years and turned his life around.
Wow. You mentioned it a little bit already, but a big part of your story is being in the Navy and being a Navy SEAL. What made you want to pursue that?
Well, I just kept hearing Ronald Reagan's voice when I was younger. Ronald Reagan talked about American exceptionalism. He talked about a shiny beacon on the hill. He talked about being part of something bigger than yourself, service, sacrifice, love of country. He talked about building a 600 ship Navy. And there was a movie that came out back in the day. You remember the movie Top Gun? I mean, the motorcycles, the airplanes, all that stuff. In high school, my buddies and I were sitting around and we said, you know what, we're going to buy motorcycles because we saw it in a magazine. Guys had leather jackets. They were smoking cigarettes. Of course, I don't smoke, never did, but they just looked cool. So I would knock on every door for hours at a time. Can I cut your grass? Can I cut your grass? Can I cut your grass? And they would say no, no, no. But I'd get some yeses. But I would shovel snow, trim bushes, do everything. I built up a ton of cash and I bought a motorcycle. I was the only one in high school that had a motorcycle. So I wanted to be a pilot. My grades were bad, but I took celestial air navigation, aerodynamics, got the top scores in Virginia. But I took karate. My friends talked me into taking karate, and the sensei was a Green Beret in Vietnam. And he would always say, why do you want to be a pilot? If someone takes your plane away, you're no good. But if you become a Green Beret, you are a weapon. So you know what I said? Nah, I want to fly jets. But then one day, someone gave me a magazine. I actually have a copy of it now. Someone gave it to me for Veterans Day. It's called Gung Ho. It had a whole issue, nothing but dedication to Navy SEALs. You know, back then, you would go to the library, you couldn't find anything on Navy SEALs. They were very secret back then. But this whole magazine was all about Navy SEALs. It said toughest men alive. It said you had a better chance of being president of the United States to become a Navy SEAL. It said there was 200 men per class. Usually 20 graduate. One class graduated 0 out of 200. Sniper rifles, scuba diving, explosives, skydiving, everything that any red-blooded American boy would want to do. So I took the magazine to my Green Beret sensei, Vietnam veteran. I said, what about these guys? And he said, they're a bunch of crazy blank blank. And by the way, you're too small and you could never do it. So maybe that psychology kind of motivated me a little bit. So, of course, I went down to the recruiter, took the ASVAB test to sign up to be a Navy SEAL. And my grades weren't really good in high school, to be honest. But the recruiter said I had the highest ASVAB score he'd ever seen. And so I said, well, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And he says, you don't qualify to be a Navy SEAL, but you qualify to be a nuclear engineer, which I don't want to be a nuclear engineer. So I walked over to the Marine. I know. I'm like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
So I walked over to the Marine recruiter. It's this huge guy with a real tight uniform. And I go, I want to be a Marine. He goes, all right, son, I'm going to sign you up. I was getting ready to sign the paperwork. And the Navy guy comes in and says, all right, I'll give you a chance to be a Navy SEAL. But if you don't make it, we're going to send you to school to be a nuclear engineer. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
But I served 10 years. I became one of the youngest snipers in Navy SEAL history. Served all over the world, did some great things for our country. And I tell you, I just love our country. Our country was founded in the church. It was founded on freedom. And if my country asked, I'd do it all again.
Is there one story that sticks out in your mind from that time?
Probably a whole bunch. I think the big thing is the brotherhood. I mean, it's just one thing you learn in the military, and this has carried me in politics, is being selfless, not selfish. You know, we have two teams. One is called the me team, and one is called the we team. These lessons are always drilled into your head in the SEAL teams because we're always outnumbered. We're always a small group, and we're always behind enemy lines. Yet we always win because it's not about me, it's about the team. If you can put your differences aside, treat people with respect, and work as a team, oftentimes you can turn the impossible to a possible, or you can turn a no into a yes in politics. And so, anyway, those are the lessons that were hit on us all the time. And I guess I got a million stories in my head about all that. But yeah, 10 years of serving our country is a huge honor.
Are there any habits that you took away from being a Navy SEAL that helped you to be a better dad?
Yeah. It's if you take it, just building a relationship. It's the same thing, just getting to know your kids. What motivates you? I don't know if you have a brother or sister, but if you did, what motivates you is different than motivates your brother or sister. So getting to know your children, and what motivates them, and building that relationship and that trust. Trust is hard. to build, easy to lose, but a big way to build that trust is building those relationships, knowing that you can be yourself, you can share anything. One of the things I did with my son, my oldest son, he just got deployed to the Middle East in the military. That boy's big and strong. He couldn't walk when I met him. He was like this big. Now he's like a big boy. But one of the things I did with him is at the high school, I guess the parents were buying kids very fancy cars. So I think my son assumed he was going to get a fancy car. And one thing I think is a cancer for kids nowadays is entitlement. You should be grateful for what you get and be appreciative. Entitlement is like a poison, I think. And so he kept saying, when am I going to get a car? When am I going to get a car? But because of his attitude, I actually bought him a $1,200 pickup truck with no bumper, leaking gas. It wouldn't run. And that thing sat in the garage for about a month. And finally, one day, my son said, hey, can we work on that truck? So we went to the junkyard, bought some parts. We went to AutoZone, bought some parts. I got a friend who has a paint shop. By the time we got done with that truck, it was the coolest truck in the state of Virginia. But what's best about it is the hours and hours of time as a teenager, he and I were under the truck turning wrenches, talking about his girlfriend, talking about his concerns, talk about what he wanted to do with his life. That idea of us working on a truck together brought us closer. And all his friends ended up asking him whenever their cars broke down to help out. So I think that's a good idea for fathers that are listening to me is find something. It could be snowboard, it could be hiking, it could be putting model airplanes together, who knows, but find some way that you guys do something together where you can share thoughts and ideas and some of the challenges that your son might be going through.
How did becoming a dad change you as a man?
I guess I would say it made me grow up. Obviously we all think we're grown up, but it made me want to learn everything. I was like, holy cow, I've got to learn everything so I can teach my child everything. So it was definitely a mindset. When you think about, it was a reality check too, because, you hear people talk about having children, but once you have one, it's like, whoa, this is real. So it's a real wake-up call, and it's a real responsibility. But I got to tell you, it's a huge honor. I ran into somebody at the supermarket with my kids one time, 80-year-old, said, wow, you have beautiful children. And I said, well, thank you. And then they said, I never had children. And then, that's an awkward conversation. And then they said, nobody comes to visit me. Our children are our legacy that we ever existed. And I think Charlie Kirk had it right. He said he wants everybody to get married and have lots of babies. And so if you don't, you're going to miss out on some of the best things that God has in store for you with regard to life.
I want to turn a little bit to politics now.
Sure.
What made you decide to run? You had done all these other cool things already. What made you decide you wanted to get into politics?
Well, essentially, you say that. I think we skipped over one thing, and that's a business. I got out of the Navy. I started a business, an outdoor fitness class. Navy SEAL brothers, family members, and friends said, what you're doing will never work. Because I created the outdoor fitness class in the rain and the snow and the sleet for men and women, in shape, out of shape, all backgrounds. I mean, all political backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, etc. For 1 hour a day, we'd put our differences aside and work together. Team-based fitness. And I had 2 women go to the doctor because they thought they had a tumor. And the doctor said, ma'am, that's a muscle. I had a 320-pound mother lose 160 pounds, run a half marathon, and won a national weight loss competition on national TV. She broke down crying and said she did it for her children. On the show, the host said, we'll give you a personal trainer and nutritionist, come back in 3 months. She said, I want to train with that Navy SEAL guy. So the ones that had personal trainers came back in 3 months, lost 2 dress sizes. Her name is Brooke, lost 6 dress sizes, but also look at her HDL, heart rate, etc. She was healthy and worked on her mental health and everything at the same time. And now she's remarried and life is great. So that's team-based physical fitness training. And then one day a high school football coach said, well, you're a Navy SEAL. Will you teach us leadership? And I said, well, I'm not a football coach, but I'll do that. And I helped them out. I'm doing push-ups and carrying sandbags and throwing up in my training. And they won a state championship. So the team that got second place that year hired me the next year, and by luck, they won a state championship. So then Penn State football, men and women's basketball, Ohio, Illinois, USC, Texas football, basketball, teams all over the country hired me, and I was a part of 18 Division I championships by just teaching people to be selfless, not selfish, and work as a team. So then one day, there's a whole lot in between. I also broke my neck. I don't know if you know that. I used to do 20 one-finger pull-ups. I was undefeated on the SEAL obstacle course, and I was completely paralyzed. Took me a year to walk. They told my wife I wouldn't make it through the night. So God gave me a second chance. And during that recovery, my oldest boy went in the Navy. And I got a phone call. Someone said, "You say you love your country. You should run for the Virginia House of Delegates." So I said, number one, Navy SEALs don't do politics. And number two, what the heck is the Virginia House of Delegates? So the guy convinced, he told me it was 60 days a year. I fell for it. And he said, "You got 1 hour, let me know." So I said, "Well, then the answer is no. But if you let my wife and I pray on it, we'll let you know in the morning." And so I went to bed, had a dream. And in that dream, I had dreamed I'd won. So I think my dog wants my attention. Do you see my dog over here?
I could hear him.
Yeah, she's huge. Remy, come up here. Anyway, she's a gigantic Great Pyrenees. But anyway, yeah, so I thought it'd be me against a Democrat like on TV, but it was me against 6 Republicans. And I had no money. I had no endorsements, but I worked hard. I got sunburned ears, nose, and lips, and met people that told me they were 80, 90 years old and never had anybody knock on their door. I just worked hard. And by the grace of God, we won and had a lot of success. You know, we got Policymaker of the Year, Legislator of the Year, and for 8 years, I passed bills every year with every Democrat, every Republican voting yes. And I even, at the same time, got the highest award for conservatism. And my last year in the state Senate, I had 2 bills. Every Republican said, "You will never pass these 2 bills." Passed both bills with every Democrat, Republican voted yes. And one of them was a pro-life bill. So now fast forward to Congress. So now I'm in Congress. I was campaigning for state Senate, and people come up to me and tug on my shirt and say, "I know you're running for state Senate, but we want you to run for Congress." And I said, "No, I'm running for state Senate." And everywhere I go around the district, whether it be parades or whatever, people would ask me to run for Congress. And I kept telling them no to the point where they got mad at me. And I'm like, how can you get mad at me for saying no? So we prayed on that, and we're like, well, I guess we're being called to run for Congress. So we put our name in the hat to run for Congress. And man, I had people attacking me like a hornet's nest saying I had a 1% chance of winning and everything else. But I gave it to God. If God wants me to be in Congress, that's okay. If not, that's okay. So we had a very contested primary. They said I had a 1% chance. We only won by 355 votes. But by the grace of God, it's an opportunity or a chance to continue service to our great nation. So we've been in Congress 18 months. We've solved a lot of problems because I have a great team. We've returned over $10 million back into the pockets of people owed to them by the federal government. We just dropped another pro-life bill at the federal level. And gosh, in 18 months, I got the highest award for conservatism with Club for Growth, CPAC, and the Institute for Legislative Analysis. And just like the General Assembly, the Family Research Council and Heritage Foundation both gave us 100. So we're solving problems, we're passing bills, and we're getting things done. We actually recently just passed 2 bills in 3 weeks. We worked together across the aisle and passed the bill out of the House in 6 months. So it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this interview. It really is amazing what we can achieve when we put our differences aside, treat people with respect, and work as a team. Sometimes you can turn impossible to a possible. And in politics, sometimes you can turn a no into a yes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that gets talked about a lot is just how divisive politics is right now. And I don't know if there's a lot of people that think like you. So what gives you hope for the future?
Well, I know God is in control. So I just remind myself that. I had an interview one time and somebody said, they're calling you all these names and all this, that, and they're calling you. How do you feel about that? And I said, well, they don't define me. God does. And I'm just going to focus on being the best congressman I can be. But I have a lot of hope. When I hear this younger generation is going to be more conservative and more Christian. You know, when I was a Navy SEAL, I don't drink or smoke. So I would go to church no matter what country I was in. And I'm not a Catholic, but if all they had was a Catholic church, I would go to a Catholic church. So when I got a phone call to run for politics, I don't know how to do that. I just know that our country was founded in the church. And so what I did was I started going to church after my church every Sunday. So my wife and I go to our church 8 a.m. every Sunday. And then I go to a second or a third church. And now I'm up to 404 different churches in the district. And it's more about your heart. But this thick head of mine, I can almost finish the scripture before the pastor. So I'm making progress, but I got a long ways to go. But I guess seeing a church attendance across the district with more young people gives me hope. To see people like Charlie Kirk, sadly, he was murdered for his point of view. The one thing about Charlie Kirk is he gave everyone a voice, even if you totally disagreed. My dog wants some serious attention. Oh, we're almost done here.
We're almost done.
We're almost done. Yeah. So Charlie Kirk could articulate our conservative values better than anyone I've ever seen, and our Christian values, what we believe in and why we believe it. And at 57 years old, people always say that he inspired young people. But I'm 57 years old. He inspired the heck out of me as well. So anyway, I think his lessons and messages will live on for hundreds of years.
One of the questions I like to ask everyone as I'm interviewing them, obviously this podcast in general is focused on fatherhood. So when you get to the end of your life, what do you hope that your kids remember about you?
Well, that I love them, number one. I'm a Christian and I live in a righteous and holy life and being obedient to God. I think that's the number one.
All right. Congressman McGuire, for guys that want to connect with you, how can they keep up with what you're doing in Congress and all the other stuff that you've got going on?
Yeah, so we've got two things going on in Congress. It's really confusing. So you have an official side and a political side. On the official side, we have a website. It's mcguire.house.gov. That's on the official side. And on the political side, it's just mcguireva.com. If you go to either of those two websites, they'll have social medias for the official side, social medias for the political side. I don't know why they divide it up like that. It'd be simpler if you just had one. But it's mcguire.house.gov and mcguireva.com. But I want to just remind everybody that we live in the greatest country ever because our rights come from God. And those God-given rights are enshrined and are found in documents. In fact, in the 13 colonies, you couldn't be elected to anything unless you were a Christian. And our founding fathers said that our country, our way of life will not work unless we are a moral people. People need to remember that. And our country may be small, but we have lifted more people out of poverty, given more people freedom and opportunity than any other country in history. And if you look back to the Berlin Wall, when it came down, not one person ran over to the communist side. Everyone ran over to the freedom side. And so this socialist, communist ideology that's becoming popular with young people in the country is dangerous. Socialism and communism, you can Google it, you can look it up. Don't take my word for it. It has created more tyranny and killed hundreds, not thousands, hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century. So our system is not perfect, but by far it is the best. And you need to love your country. If you're on a basketball team and you hate your basketball team, you're not going to win any games. So God gave us faith, hope, and love being the strongest. So I mean it when I say it as a Christian. If you voted for me, I love you. If you didn't vote for me, I love you. And it's not about me, it's about we the people. And my goal is to save our country, to leave it better than I found it, so that the young people today have more freedom than I had growing up, not less.
All right, Congressman McGuire, thank you so much for taking the time to do this morning. I appreciate it.
All right, Landry, thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find out more about us by going to our website, noblepursuit.org, or by following us on Instagram @noblepursuitmen. You can find out more information about today's guest by looking in the description below.